Kia ora koutou, nā mihi nui kia koutou, ko Mākiri te maunga, ko Kaipara te moana, ko Kaipara te awa, ko Matawaka te waka, ko Tauiwi te iwi, ko Ngāti Pākehā, ko Helensville te kāinga, ko Te Atatū te kāinga, ko Osborne te whānau, ko Mark Takuingo, nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. I grew up on the Kaipara in Helensville, now live in Te Atatū with my family. As Christina said, I've been involved in education for a long time. I was part of the senior leadership team at Albany Senior High School, set that school up, and the interesting connection is what we're talking about here today in terms of e-portfolios, but also the openness and the transparency that are inherent in portfolios, because in fact the three things that drove a big part of my work at Albany Senior High School was open spaces and open access to spaces, also open source software, free software, so you've got the tools to be able to do stuff, and also Creative Commons and open access to information. So spaces, tools and information, and they really come together in a lot of what we're talking about this morning. Just three things. One, I'll give you a copy of the presentation at the end, so there'll be a link coming, you'll get all of this stuff. I also, if you've got a device, mobile or laptop, I want to run a couple of little polls through the Keynote. So if you have got a device connected to the Wi-Fi, make sure it's on, and we'll do a little bit of knowledge building as we go through the Keynote. And that's probably it, actually. In all my free time, I'm currently completing a PhD at the University of Melbourne on change leadership in modern learning environments. So when the spaces change to something like the amazing building that we've got here, how do we support shift in teaching practice? So how do we get the headspace right when the physical space changes? And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today draws directly from that. So this is coming out of the change leadership literature, centered around the importance of knowledge creation within organizations, because that's a crucial element of leading change, is enabling people to create new knowledge. So they're owning knowledge and they're contributing to the sum total of what is known in the world. So it's a very agentic process. So what I want to do is talk about what are the features of knowledge building organizations, why they need it, why knowledge creation, why has this suddenly become important, and also towards the second half of the session, what I'll be doing is talking about the role that e-portfolios, and in particular transparency of process, so the process of knowledge creation, and the socialisation of that process. So that's what I'm going to hope to cover today. Because you're all really clever, intelligent people, this first thing I'm going to whiz through really, really quickly, because I'll take it as read that you know this stuff. But I think it's important to look backwards before we start looking forwards. People who talk about the history of education, particularly Western education, generally divided into three phases: Education 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. You might be surprised to learn that we're currently in Education 3.0. Education 1.0, think of the village, think of primarily agrarian societies, think of pre-industrial revolution, so pre-1750-ish in Western Europe. You learnt stuff from the people around you. So you learnt primarily from your family, you learnt from your village, most people lived and died within about 12 or 15 miles of their place of birth. Transportation was difficult. It was hard to know too much about what was happening 2 valleys over, because you didn't get to travel very easily. So when we look at the Education 1.0 world, this is primarily immediate, localised and contextualised. We learn things from our families. And to illustrate that, one of the things that we do to show just how encoded this idea was into society was to look at the way that occupations, in particular parental occupations, determined the future direction of children. So you were kind of born into the things that you would learn about. So if you learned to make barrels in the Education 1.0 world, your surname would probably be Cooper. A Cooper or a Hooper. It's also a barrel maker. And so, you know, we look at this and we think about the other names that are that reference occupations, the future, the direction. There's just dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So interesting, Education 1.0, easy to access this information, but if you like, what you had was a curriculum that was an inch wide. You'd learn everything about being a cooper or a carpenter or a miller or a baker, so you'd go really, really deep into that stuff, but it would ultimately be quite narrow. You were really born into the stuff that you're learning about. All right, so that's Education 1.0. Roll on Education 2.0. The industrial world, we know this stuff. So big factories, huge urbanisation. One of the things that changed, that led to the change from Education 1.0 to 2.0 was a piece of technology. So the printing press made it easy, if you had some money, to be able to learn what was happening 2 valleys over, because you could read about it. If you had money, you had the luxury of being able to read and write, and you could probably afford some kind of printed materials. And so technology created a disruption, the shift from 1.0 to 2.0. And so we have these wonderful workplaces where we can just produce amazing goods and just churn them out. One of the ways to think about the 2.0 workplace was that the people who hired you for your hands and your back, the manual labour. They didn't necessarily hire you for the stuff that you knew. And one of the reasons they could do that was because you take the whole assembly of a product and break it down to its component parts. So you would never know how to create a car, but you would know how to do your little job over and over again. So this is specialisation, division of labour, the assembly line. These are the principles upon which the Industrial Revolution were based. So we looked at these and thought, well, you know, education, what we're trying to do is assemble something. We're trying to assemble a sentient human being that we'd be proud of walking the streets. And so we looked at the efficiency of this model, and it really, really was an efficient model, and we just brought that across. So we would create rooms like this, where somebody at the front would have some knowledge, talk, and generally just write for 6 hours on a blackboard, and other people, 30, 50, 100 of them, would copy that stuff down. So the technology was such that we would use spoken word and written word to transfer knowledge from one place to another, and that's incredibly efficient. If you're trying to get an idea or a piece of knowledge from one place to 60 places, these work extremely well. Very, very well. So knowledge transfer, moving information from one place to another. But of course, you're tuning into the fact that this is not knowledge creation. This is just moving it from one place to another. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about the human brain that we didn't know about when we were building these kinds of things. So this might have worked well for some people, but actually it works terribly for others. It might have worked well in some contexts and doesn't work very well in others. And so, you know, we bring all these things across. The factory hooter, we didn't quite have a factory hooter, but we had the bell. You'd start and you stop at a certain place. You know, it's about organising people to get them ready for work. We couldn't dress them up in little overalls and coveralls and things like that, but we did the next best thing, make them all look the same and normal and average. You know, shifts became timetables, batch production, year levels, division of labour became subjects or year levels, where you wouldn't be expected to know, as a teacher, the whole sum total of all human knowledge. You just focus on your little thing and put your spring on that cog, spring cog, and then pass the kid down to the next station, and they would get something else. Hopefully at the other end, having put raw materials or 5-year-olds in at one end, we'd get human beings who knew stuff and were able to do things in the world at the other end. The identical products, you don't want weird and wonderful things coming off the end of your assembly line. You want something that works. And so we tried to create, you know, some kind of certification to say that if you were stamped, you knew roughly this much. And, you know, the whole system just runs on rules and procedures. So it's really easy to look at all those features of the industrial model of education and think, yeah, I can see where they came from. I can see the genesis. I can see. So this is, you know, primarily in the primary, intermediate, and secondary sector. But how many of those things on the right are still in place in schools? All of them, right? So yeah, those old black and white photos of, you know, days gone by. It's actually, there's quite a strong heritage of the industrial model still in place. And this is premised on the idea of knowledge transfer rather than knowledge creation. These are all designed to make the most efficient knowledge transfer machine you can get. Built into this was getting them ready for the workforce, getting them ready to be units of labour. And this idea of the hidden curriculum. This idea that in addition to learning stuff, you are learning how to be. We've got a 5-year-old who's just started school, and first day of school was so excited, go in there, and all of it, everything he was learning was hidden curriculum. He already knew his alphabet, knew how to count, do all that sort of stuff, but we were focusing on sitting down on the mat, crisscross, legs and arms, crisscross, crisscross, everyone, hands up, hands up, hands up, who's listening, who's not. It's all hidden curriculum, getting them ready for this. So, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with obedience, being punctual, being polite, having some respect. This is really important. But again, this is one of the features of the move to 3.0. This is necessary, but it is no longer sufficient to survive in the world. There was a time where if you master the hidden curriculum, you could get a job for life. Just sit down and do the job, routinely just do the stuff. Eventually, 35 years later, you'd get a gold watch on your way. Now, if you just spend 5 years of your job not innovating, not finding better ways to doing things, just deferring to the manual or the rule book on the best way to do things, you're probably falling behind. So this is a challenge. The hidden curriculum is necessary but no longer sufficient to prepare us, our graduates, for the world. We're still building spaces. To be fair, this school's 2 years old and they've got learning settings like that, but to be fair, this was after the cleaners had come in, cleaned the space, and then put the furniture back the way that a classroom should be, which tells you a whole bunch of mental models that exist in community about what happens. This is still knowledge transfer. So we're building new spaces, but we're still building brand new 150-year-old spaces designed for knowledge transfer. So then roll on Education 3.0, and this is where we are. This is what we're inventing at the moment. This is in addition to knowledge transfer, because you still need to know stuff. You can't invent new stuff if you've got no base knowledge. But again, necessary but not sufficient. You need to learn stuff, but you also need to create new knowledge. So what are some of these features? What are the markers of Education 3.0? So this is, let's just take a moment here. This is a poll. I want you to tell me which of these key skills you think we focus on most in education. I've used that phrase, education, to encompass everything that we do from early childhood right the way through to tertiary. All right? So if you've got your devices, get ready. I'm going to put a web address up and then put a 6-number code for you to enter your opinion. All right, so which one do you think we focus on most? I'm asking you to choose one. Is it these kinds of skills, routine cognitive skills, so mental tasks easily structured into rule-based processes? So an example of a routine cognitive task would be to measure the volume of a cylinder. So you're applying a particular rule, doing some calculations, doing stuff, or calculate the distance from A to B, or train leaves the station, travelling at blah, blah. Routine cognitive stuff that can be solved by following an algorithm, essentially. Do we do that most in education? Do we do non-routine cognitive, which is still mental tasks, using your brain, but it's solving problems that haven't yet been solved before? So if I need to measure the distance from A to B, that's been solved. If I actually talk to Google Maps, it'll tell me. But how do we solve world hunger? How does this community improve its conservation of water? How do we collectively solve this problem? There's no answer in the back of the book for non-routine cognitive. How much of education time is spent on that stuff? Is it manual stuff? So spring cog, just doing a physical task over and over and over again? Is it non-routine manual? Do we focus on that, which is doing physical tasks, again, hands and back, but things that are different every time? So designing a piece of custom furniture, where each thing that you do is still manual and physical, but it's different every time. Or the fifth option that I want to give you is, do we do non-routine interpersonal? I don't think there is routine interpersonal, because every human being I know gets more interesting the more you talk to them, and weirder and weirder. I don't know if you've noticed that. But working with people is often, by its very nature, non-routine, because people have different needs, they have different contexts. So what I want you to do is go to sorry, at the back, but it's govote.at, govote.at, and that's the 6-letter code. And I just want you to choose which of those you think we focus on most. Govote.at. This is using a tool called Mentimeter. Mentimeter. Wonderful little instant polling and response system. Tis. Yes, this is also good. So govote.at and you enter 459260. Which do you think we focus on most? Routine cognitive, non-routine cognitive, routine manual, non-routine manual, non-routine interpersonal.
This is free.
Free?
It's free.
It is, yes.
To a point, or?
Yes, to a point. So the kinds of questions you can ask, I've given a multi-choice question. You can also ask open questions, but things like ranked answers, pay the money. It embeds really nicely into a whole bunch of things. It's a good tool.
Its input box is busted on Firefox.
It's what?
Yeah, the code input box is busted on Firefox.
Oh dear. Who's managed to enter something? Okay, that's cool. I'm going to move on, so you're going to lose the code in a second. 459260. We'll come back to it. So that's our kind of jumping off point. This is part of the knowledge creation process, right? Where are we currently at? What's your perception of where are we in terms of these the development of these skills? Quickly, looking at the drivers of change, what are the things that mean that old way of doing education, 2.0, is increasingly out of step with what we need? What's changed? So if the printing press was the thing that shifted us from 1.0 to 2.0, what's shifting us from 2.0 to 3.0? What's the disruption? Very, very quickly you come to things like technology as a significant disruptor. So historically, what we'd do with schools is we'd get a bunch of clever people and we'd put them in a place and we'd send the children to be near those clever people, cross our fingers that they learnt something from being in their proximity. All right, so the learning happened, it was determined by time and place, from 9 till 3, 5 days a week, learning happened inside there. And it was because the technology didn't exist for us to break down that tyranny of time and space. Roll on, low cost, Wi-Fi devices, roll on things like open access to information, things like Wikipedia, mission statement, make freely available the sum total of all human knowledge to everyone anywhere on earth. This is good. And when we've got some devices to be able to access that, it breaks down the tyranny of time and space. So there's one driver of change. Means that instead of, in that old education 2.0 world, if you didn't catch the stuff while you were at school, if you weren't paying attention, didn't memorize it, didn't get it, it's actually really hard to get it just wandering down the street. It was hard to get that. Now, you can get it just wandering down the street. We're doing some renovation at home, and you know that if you go into Mitre 10 Mega, some of you I'm sure do, on the end of the aisles there's those videos and the same guy's telling you how to put in a retaining wall or do this, that and the other thing. I love those videos, I'm just fascinated by them. But it annoys me that if you walk in halfway through, you miss the first steps on how to put your retaining wall in. So you've got to wait for it to loop back. I discovered the YouTube channel, Mitre 10 Mega. All the videos are there. You can watch them as many times as you want. You can rewind them. I learned not only how to put in a retaining wall, but also if you've got a broken tile in your floor, how to get a broken tile out and replace it. We don't even have a broken tile. But if any of you have, I now have the skills to be able to, and I did, there you go, a piece of cake. Let's talk. And I learnt it on my couch. I was sitting there with my phone, just watching it. It's genius. And so democratizing that information. And you know, the driver of change, the Western or the Allied forces in the Second World War, triumphant, amazing, incredible people, but you know, there's so many of these comparisons around the computing power that you have in a musical birthday card. It exceeds the total computing power that the Allied forces had in the Second World War, right? So we're increasing in the power of computers, and that cost a couple of dollars. because of this thing called Moore's Law. Many of you I know Moore's Law. Moore proposed that the power of computers, or processing power, would double every 2 years. And that in fact has been the case, and the price is halved. So it's effectively doubling every 12 months. And so that's literally, since Moore proposed it in 1965, that's a billion-fold increase, exponential increase in the power of computers. So they can do so much more stuff now. So this is one of the drivers of change. Here's a little test for you. How many of these robots can you name? Admittedly, this is slightly weighted towards children of the 80s, but can you name these robots? Yeah, C3PO. R2D2. Wally, that's from the 90s, yeah. Robocop. Technically he's a cyborg, right? Yeah, he's not a robot. Yeah. Train spotter question. Okay, so what do they all have in common? They're all from movies, right? TVs, not the movies, not TV. Right, well done. Next one. Can you name these robots? Hey. Yep. Library self-check. In New Zealand. So what do these robots have in common? They take money. They take money. Yeah. Sometimes it's your own money. Yeah. This is the difference, right? This is free. This is free knowledge. Libraries. They've made people redundant. Moore's Law means that 10 years ago, a lot of this stuff would have been impossible. And doubling, billion-fold increase means that when you're tuned into it, just walk around your world and spot the robots that have taken people's jobs. They've made our lives much more convenient. If you ever want to know what it feels like to be cattle, go to the supermarket with self-check. But one of the reasons why supermarkets are galloping headlong into putting these things in is because they work 24 hours a day. They occasionally need a reboot, but they don't have sick days. And they cost a hell of a lot less than checkout operators to run. And so we're just removing human beings from the workforce and replacing them with robots. They're everywhere. They're taking people's jobs. So this comes back to what are the kinds of skills that are required? What those things are doing is mostly routine cognitive work. If A, then B. If this situation happens, then do this. When this occurs, do this. And so it's anything that can be routined or turned into an algorithm. If you're doing that kind of job in the world, you're in trouble. You're in danger, because doubling. If a machine can't do your job yet, it's only a matter of time. One of the things that computers can't do very well is knowledge creation. They can't do three things in particular. Original problem solving. So there needs to be an answer for the computer to be able to apply that. So the creative activity in using computers is creating stuff with them or programming them. That's the thing that computers can't do yet. There may come a time when they can program themselves, then all bets are off. So original problem solving, creativity, and interpersonal stuff. They're not very good at those things. Human beings are baffling to computers. All the best kind of speech-to-text recognition, facial recognition, machine learning, all that sort of stuff. And we can still confuse computers and get steam pouring out of their ears by using sarcasm. They don't cope with that very well, and it's just innate in us because we've evolved this thing over hundreds of thousands of years. So if we go back to these things, these are the things that you've just voted, which ones are we using most? And we say that in 1960, let's benchmark all of these to a level of 50, for argument's sake. Which of those between 1960 and 2010, which of them went up as skills required in the workforce, and which of them went down? Just talk to the people around you. Which of these skills became more important, more valuable in the workforce, and which became less? I'll give you a little clue. Here's what the graph looks like. 2 in particular have gone up, 3 have gone down. percentage change. Which do you reckon have gone up the most? Non-routine cognitive. That's one of them. And there's another one that's gone up. Interpersonal skills and solving original problems. Things like routine cognitive. Who voted routine cognitive was the thing that we did most, right? Quite a bit of it. And it's actually the one that's gone down the most. Solving a problem, train leaves the station, travelling at calculator, blah, blah, blah. Why? Because we now have tools, machines, robots to do that work for us. And you can see it just steadily decreasing. This is the golden age of the personal computer. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, all those guys, building machines that we could use to solve routine cognitive problems, which then freed us up to do more interesting stuff with that information. If I know that the volume of this cylinder is this, then I can create a better water tank, or I can solve world hunger, I can do whatever I want. So that's telling. This is the trend, and this is the trend that is continuing. This work, this rather landmark study, this work is continuing, and these trends show no sign of abating. One of the reasons why we've focused so heavily on routine cognitive is not because it's important, but because it's easy to test. The answer's in the back of the book. You can write a little template and place it over the multi-choice thing that the kids do, and it's easy. It also, that's the thing that makes it more likely to be done by a computer over time, because it's an algorithm, it's routine, it can be automated. So, some of the futurists that talk about this stuff, Charles Ledbetter, he captures it beautifully, this move from 2.0 to 3.0. We don't, in the developed world, send our kids down the mines anymore. Increasingly, we've hollowed out the factories. Robots and machines are doing the factory stuff. So any of that routine, blah, blah. It's the creativity, the ingenuity, and the imagination that is going to give kids, give our graduates the meaning, the purpose in their lives. So let's do this again. Based on that, which one do you think we should focus on? We've tested what we think we are focusing on. Which one, based on what we've just been talking about, which one do you think we should focus on the most? Do it again. It's a slightly different number this time. GoVote.at, 41, 55, 45. I'll just give you 30 seconds to do that. What we are going to do is have a look at, of course, these polls at the end. Not working. Hands up if you managed to enter something. A bit of a representative sample, hopefully. 41, 55, 45. I'm going to move on. So Sugata Mitra, many of you will know Sugata Mitra, he talks about the move from 2.0 to 3.0, the industrial model versus the post-industrial model. And he says, this is one of the great quotes, it's very fashionable to say that it's broken. It's not broken at all. It's beautifully constructed to do what it does. It's just that we don't need this anymore. That knowledge transfer, or only knowledge transfer, we do need some knowledge. You do need to know your times tables. You need to know how to spell. You need to know some of the laws of physics. But just knowing those and being a walking textbook or walking encyclopedia is no longer enough. That's just your jumping off point. It's just outdated. And one of the things, I work in primary, intermediate, secondary. One of the things that we're gifted with is this wonderfully visionary document, the New Zealand curriculum. And so it acknowledges this and it prefigures this by a number of years. And historically, when I was at school, this was the curriculum. You learnt the learning areas, you learnt stuff. You go to a room and somebody would give you, empty vessel, top you up. But now what we've got are these things that help us to do stuff. with these learning areas. So excellence, innovation, inquiry and curiosity, diversity, equity. These are the things that we do with the stuff. So it's that idea of necessary but not sufficient. This is necessary, and this is the stuff that is sufficient. This is what we should be doing with it. And so we're kind of enabled to be able to use that. In fact, it's baked into the compulsory sector. This is what we should be doing. So if Education 2.0 was typified by the idea of learning, and again, I'm not saying learning is a bad thing. Learning is really, really important. You do need to know the laws of physics. You should probably learn about Shakespeare and whatever else we decide it's important to learn. But what that is we're acquiring the intellectual heritage of our community. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're learning about stuff that has gone before. In 2.0, a huge amount of our time was spent on that. And now what people are doing is saying, well, that's important. That's the starting point. But in addition to that, what we also need to do is to build new knowledge. Because if you're just passively waiting to receive the knowledge that previous generations had garnered by hard-won victories, then you're not adding to that. And it's not something that all of a sudden one day you wake up when you're a grown-up and put on a lab coat or something and then you contribute to the sum total of all human knowledge. You can do it. 5-year-olds do it. Early childhood centres do it. They build solutions for things where no solution has previously existed. The more you exercise those muscles, the better you are when you come to the really high-level complex things that you need to do. So I want to talk about the learning and also knowledge building or knowledge creation. What is it that leads to knowledge creation within organisations? What are the factors? What are the precursors to knowledge creation? The reason that knowledge is important, particularly creating new knowledge, is because of that rapid change that's taking place. And also, as you'll be very familiar with knowledge economy, knowledge society. Knowledge is really important, and the creation of new, better ways of doing things is actually one of the leading comparative advantages in organisations. Your ability to generate new knowledge and new innovative solutions. So there's some factors that need to be in place. We need to have the right structures, we need to have the right spaces, and we also need to have the right systems. In terms of structures, you'll be very familiar with something like this. You won't be able to read it, don't even try. But this is an org chart, right? An organisational hierarchy. This is the pyramid. This is for a railroad actually, nickel plate road. We've got the president, then we've got vice presidents, and then we've got assistant vice president, and then so it comes down the chain. If you're down here, you do as you're told. And in fact, if you're here, you do as you're told, right? So we pass the knowledge down. That has been the dominant way of organising organisations through the 20th century. There's a guy called Gordon Mackenzie, again references at the end. He was one of the creatives for Hallmark cards. He was a really wonderful genius. He wrote a book called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. He argues that all organisations are hairballs. It would be nice to think that there's a grand design, a master plan for the organisation, but actually it's just a collection of people who come together, and each one adds to the hairball. And a larger organisation doesn't necessarily mean a more efficient or coherent organisation, it just means more hair. And so he talks about the pyramid and the features of that pyramid structure. These are the classic features, right? It's top down, it's literally divided against itself, layer up on layer up on layer. Yeah, the blocks and the bricks. It's stratified, it's petrified, it's predictable. It's definitely a monument to the past. And if you've missed the metaphor, it's a tomb. It's where dead people are. The pyramid, classic top down. I've made a decision and I'm just going to pass it down the machine. The people at the bottom, they're basically mummies. And so this is his example of the conversations that take place within a pyramid. Basically, the top management have the vision because they're higher up. They can see the context, they can see the situation, but the people who are way down the bottom, under this crushing mountain, don't have perspective, so they don't know the big picture, they don't know the strategy, and they don't have the resources to be able to do something. So he proposes a different model from the pyramid, and this is about the structure. He talks about as an alternative, the plum tree, so a very organic alternative to the two. He says, this is the plum tree is the bottom up, it's flexible, it's got branches, the branches can move, it's a dynamic organism and it grows. So maybe, we should look at our org charts, less of pyramid, more of plum tree. What is the plum tree? The plum tree starts with, this is a business metaphor, education, we might just say resources. Resources are channeled via top management to the places where it's needed. So resources, money, expertise goes to the people who do the really important work out at the edges. And so those are our frontline educators. They're empowered to be able to make decisions. The conversations are quite different. What do you need, as opposed to this is what we're doing, just get on and do it. So the pyramid and the plum tree, we're talking about structures here. Leadership for a slow-moving world, you could get away with the pyramid. Some clever person at the top would think and talk and play a round of golf with somebody else who was knowledgeable, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, would kind of come up with a plan. That would then be issued in a memo and passed through the organisation. Now, with a fast-moving world, while you're playing golf, other people are innovating. And so the leadership for a fast-moving world is about having networked teams that are empowered to make decisions, and they share knowledge in order to make better decisions. So this is knowledge creation. So it's the opposite of that pyramid model. It's the structure that best fits it. So in addition to structures, we need spaces. And Christina started to talk about my work in architecture. It's about creating places where knowledge transfer, knowledge creation, knowledge building can happen, can take place. So new knowledge is often created on the fringes of disciplines. It's when you put technology next to art that really interesting stuff starts to happen. It's where you put music next to engineering that we can do some really interesting creative stuff. So putting walls between those disciplines actually decreases the amount of knowledge creation that takes place in those disciplines. So a lot of my work is about creating amazing spaces for knowledge building to take place. This is a classic 1950s block of classrooms. The leaders have identified that in this school that having walls between groups of students and professionals all trying to achieve the same thing was a bit mad, because you couldn't see what was happening on one side or other of the wall. So they literally just got the chainsaw and cut holes in this block, this assembly line, and created shared spaces with a range of different uses. So we're doing a lot of this work in schools to create spaces that lead to knowledge creation, allowing different groups of students to work together, to share knowledge, to learn from each other, to a kanataina, all that sort of stuff. So we need spaces. One of my heroes is a woman called Quinn Norton, and she talks about the importance of maker spaces or hacker spaces, being able to go in and just build stuff that you want to build. All schools should have hacker spaces. The temporary autonomous zones, because for a while, under some supervision, you go in and you, as a learner, you're autonomous. You're solving the problem that you want to solve. You're stretching that knowledge creation muscle. You're building that disposition. And this is the killer. This is the great quote from Quinn for me. It's a key skill for people who are going to be working on projects that are not going to be managed from the top down. As we kiss goodbye to the pyramid and we have lateral organisation and we have cross-department organisation, these are the skills that they need. So being able to work with a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old, and to be able to make a contribution to a soft materials project or a robotics project, to be able to work through those lateral relationships is crucial. So these are the kinds of spaces that people are providing in schools. Taupaki School provides a make club, the Ministry of Make. You just come as a kid and you build the thing that you want to build. So it's robotics, it's soft materials, it's food, it's engineering, it's, what's the itch that you want to scratch? Walking about daily in your world, What's the thing that is broken and we haven't got a solution for? Come in here and print something using a 3D printer to fix that thing. Knowledge creation. So the spaces are really important as well. If you're not lucky enough to have a maker space, you can get a maker crate. So this is literally a shipping container that goes on the back of a truck. Bridget McKendry and Carl Pavlitich in Christchurch, they have this makerspace. Inside, it's just kitted out with all the most amazing stuff. It lands on your site, you plug it in, kids come in and just build and create incredible stuff, and then it goes on the truck to the next. It's like the TARDIS, moving from place to place. Or like Kroll, kids of the 80s, yeah. But 3D printer, it's got soldering irons, it's got robotics, it's got vinyl cutters, it's got all sorts of stuff in there. So in order to do this knowledge creation, we need the spaces. We need physical spaces as well. And there's Bridget, by the way, 3D printing a shoe. Amazing. She's incredible. Pixel Brid on Twitter. All right, but that's not enough. We need the structures, we need the spaces, we also need the systems. And this is where things like e-portfolios come in. How do we capture that knowledge? How do we credential it? How do we recognize it? How do we empower the users themselves to tell the learning story behind the thing that they're learning? One thing's clear, exams don't do this very well. Stephen Heppel, it's the thing that is least likely to prepare you for a world that is full of surprises. So our assessment regimes require rethinking. And there are more and more countries and jurisdictions around the world getting rid of exit exams, doing those kinds of things, moving to a portfolio or learning story-based way of credentialing information. The way that we teach needs to change. If kids are solely dependent on us in order to get to the next thing, what should I be learning next? If their response is to look to the educator to tell them, then we've disabled them for lifelong learning. Because we're not going to be with them through their lives. They're going to have to make these kinds of decisions themselves. So more and more schools are using things like discovery time. They call it a whole range of things. Genius Hour, discovery time, passion projects, impact projects. So giving kids space within the week to say, just build something. What is it that you want to do? In this school, this is in Australia actually, they've used a lot of pop culture references like the block. This is literally where you go in and that's where all the construction materials are. If you want to build a tower or work on your kind of engineering skills, you go in there and you start building and making stuff. That's where the Lego is. So kids are engaged in this sort of stuff. The shake and bake is My Kitchen Rules. So you can go and learn how to cook, how to create, how to provide for your community, which is really the skill that they're learning in terms of cooking and growing their own food. So the processes around timetable and giving people space to be able to create new knowledge. This is Stonefield School in Mount Wellington, and these boys are learning how to use Blender 3D. Amazing open source 3D modeling software. And they're year 5 and 6 kids. This is Jackson talking about the dream come true of doing what he loves during school hours. Isn't that an indictment on what school is? Giving them space to be able to bring stuff. This is the teacher standing back. We did a similar sort of thing at Albany Senior High. These kids they built a hovercraft. Sure, just throw that out there.
We're making a hovercraft, and this is our 5 horsepower leaf blowing engine, and it's just gonna go through this intake into the board. We have a few holes in the bottom that will hopefully make it fly. It just seemed like an exciting thing to do when we found a few guides, and then we just decided to design our own, and pretty much here it is. Everything that we do on Wednesdays, it's all individual and we get to make whatever we want. So it's pretty much just an experience of whatever you want to do and experimenting with things and improving how you are yourself. because you can pick whatever you want to improve on.
So that thing about Wednesdays is 1 day a week kids get to project manage their own learning at Albany Senior High. If you want to see amazing project-based learning and the future of knowledge creation in the hands of kids, go and have a look at what they're doing there. It's amazing stuff. But if you missed it, what William said was it's improving how you are yourself. So improving yourself, you're in control of it, but you're also choosing what it is that you improve. So there's some features, some of the research lifts up some of the components or some of the factors that are required for an organisation that is a knowledge creation organisation. I've just listed them down the side there. They're hard to read, but I'll go through them. So the real ideas, real world problems, authentic problems. The idea has to be improvable. So the laws of physics are probably not improvable, but how we apply the laws of physics to design an aeroplane or to do something better is improvable. And so that's focusing on improvable ideas. Diversity, rise above means that you can just never go far enough. You're just constantly improving those ideas. Epistemic agency, so you're in control of creation of knowledge, of the way that knowledge is put together. Community knowledge, collective responsibility, democratizing knowledge, symmetric knowledge advancement, so that I learn from you, you learn from me. That's the symmetrical knowledge advancement. Pervasive knowledge building, construction, and so they go on. And so we look at e-portfolios. This is a portfolio of a kid's project, and we start to lift up some of these things. This is Lauren showing in Mahara her project. This is capturing her evidence. We've got a video there of her going through a process. We've got her designing and building, designing a dance routine that would communicate particular ideas. As we scroll down the page, we can see the beautiful Mahara Droid mobile app. So you take a photo with a mobile phone, shoot it straight through to your portfolio, and that just gets dragged down. So these are the knowledge building discourse and the improvable ideas. This is her evidence of planning, her annotation. It's a beautiful mix of analog and digital, because as long as that's sitting in Lauren's folder, if she loses her folder, it's gone. Whereas now it's available for the community to be able to see this stuff. So we use e-portfolios to tell those rich stories using the power of technology, the mobile phone, the recording device, whether it's recording a video reflection and getting it in there as part of a kind of ongoing journal, whether it's pulling resources in from outside, archiving and capturing the work that you do. The e-portfolio is one of the most powerful tools we have for facilitating these kinds of things. The same is true of teachers in the compulsory education sector. We've got this thing called Teaching's Inquiry, which is basically an action research cycle, or a cycle that we use to become better teachers every day. We reflect on where the need is for our kids. It's design thinking, actually. Where the need is in our class, how can we meet that need? Did we meet that need? And so we go and we go and we go. And again, no surprise, tools like Mahara are outstanding for capturing that process. This little, the open architecture of being able to pull a whole bunch of stuff in, embedded little SoundCloud audio reflection. I'm always doing it on my phone. The SoundCloud app, just hit record, talk to someone and capture a little dialogue, a little discussion, a little piece of feedback, push it to SoundCloud, straight into Mahara. So it's just embed code and it drops in there beautifully. The pictures, the videos, the you name it. And so those are the tools that we're using. Both we're paralleling the knowledge creation process with students, but also with teachers as well. It's not just something that we do and they don't, or vice versa. So the tools particularly powerful. I want to pause here for a second to say that this URL here gives you access to a Mahara page that's got a bunch of the resources that I've used. So if you just make a note of that, bit.ly/maharahui15, all in lowercase, we'll go to that page now and I'll just show you what's on there. So maharahui15, bit.ly/maharahui15. I'll just pop out of here. And what we'll get is this. This is my gag, right? The future. I've seen the future. Go back, it's a trap. So some of those quotations that I put up there, Creative Commons, I don't make any claim whatsoever to the wisdom encapsulated therein, but I put the pictures together. So there's those things that you can have there. We've got obviously the PDF there with the presentation that's loading. Some of the references that I've used here, the ones that I can safely share that are in the public domain or a Creative Commons license. The stuff around the changing nature of skills, the skills required in the workforce, that is from the World Economic Forum paper that's just come out. But as I said, that study's been running for quite some time about the changes. And some of the references around knowledge building come from Jan van Aalst, and there's the reference down there. So just to finish us off, here are our comments, our little knowledge creation activity. Where are we at, and then where do we need to be? So what's the difference between the two? This is what Mentimeter allows you to do. It gives you the thing to share, which I've shared with you, but then it also represents the results in real time, so you can have it up live if it loads in real time. There's one there, that one there. So this is what you think we should spend most time on: non-routine cognitive and complex communication. So there's the goal, there's the thing that we believe is most pressing, and slowly. Right, so there's the gap between where we currently are and where we think we should be. So there's a nice little piece of knowledge creation. There's a little bit of dissonance. It starts with a bit of dissonance. I'm not where I want to be. And there it is, 43:40. Back over in here, that is everything that you need. The PDF, nice PDF plugin there for all of that sort of stuff. So, knowledge creation, what we covered were the drivers of change, what education 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, what's the disruption that means at 2.0 we need to be pushing away, moving into 3.0. We looked at the three things that are required for knowledge creation. We need to have the right structures in place. So we're talking about leadership structures. We need to have the right spaces, so the physical spaces. If you walk out into this amazing building here, just go and look at all the places where people are invited to, not necessarily literally, but metaphorically rub up against each other. There's spaces outside of lecture theatres where there are standing tables to stop and just talk to somebody about what just happened in there. So the generative process of conversation. Those spaces outside of the lifts, they're right there. They're actually baked into the real estate. So the spaces are there to create that kind of interaction. All of the small, the booth spaces and the ones with the screens, so we call them Happy Days booths. With a screen at the end, a collaboration screen, you can plug your device in and 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of you can get together and just workshop something. And the invitation is there always to come together and do this sort of stuff. Do it in a social way, but do it in a way that invites people to rub up against each other. And then we also looked at the systems and the role that e-portfolios play in facilitating the generation of that idea and the knowledge creation, the reflection that's built into it, but also the democratizing of that knowledge. Because if you create that new piece of knowledge but don't share it, then we're not in a truly knowledge building organisation. So I hope that's helpful, useful. I'm a couple of minutes early, but I'm sure that won't be too much of a problem. Thank you very much, and I hope that was interesting. Cheers. Kia ora.